She had the audacity to smile when they read the first version of the will. I watched my son's wife, my daughter-in-law, Renata, lean over and whisper something in my son's ear the moment the lawyer finished the first paragraph. Ethan nodded slowly, like a man who had already spent the money in his head 100 times over. He didn't even look at me. Not once. I was sitting 3 feet away from him. His father, the man who had worked 16-hour days for 31 years to build the company they were about to swallow whole. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Walter Crane. I'm 67 years old. I spent most of my adult life building Crane Fabrication Solutions, a mid-sized industrial manufacturing company in Akron, Ohio. We made precision parts for the automotive and aerospace industries. Nothing glamorous, nothing that would impress anyone at a dinner party, but it was honest work. And over 3 decades, it became something real. Something worth approximately $40 million when my wife, Dorothy, passed away 2 years ago. Dorothy was the heart of our family. She was also, I came to understand only after she was gone, the only person holding certain things together. We had one child, Ethan. He was 39 when his mother died. He had worked at the company for 11 years, mostly in operations. He was competent. Not brilliant, but competent. I had always planned to pass the business to him eventually. That was the dream. Keep it in the family, watch him grow into it, retire knowing the thing I'd built would outlast me. What I did not plan for was Renata. My son met her at a conference in Phoenix 8 years ago. She was sharp, well-dressed, and knew exactly what to say to every person in every room. I will give her that. She had a talent for people. The problem was that her talent was entirely self-serving. I saw it early. Dorothy saw it even earlier. We talked about it quietly the way parents do when they don't want to poison their child's marriage with their own doubts. We kept quiet. We should not have. In the 3 years after Ethan married Renata, things shifted at the company in ways I couldn't always name but could always feel. Vendors I'd worked with for 20 years started calling me directly to ask if everything was okay. 2 of my senior managers, men who had been with me for over a decade, resigned within 6 months of each other. When I asked Ethan about it, he said they were resistant to change. Renata said the company needed new blood. I told myself it was generational tension. I told myself I was being an old man who couldn't let go. Then Dorothy got sick. Pancreatic cancer. Fast and merciless. We had 14 months from diagnosis to the morning I sat beside her bed in our house on Maple Ridge Drive and held her hand while she stopped breathing. I did not leave that house for 4 days afterward. I just sat in the kitchen, drank coffee, and listened to the silence where her voice used to be. Ethan came to the funeral. He gave a speech that made people cry. Renata wore a black dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. I noticed, because Dorothy would have noticed. And I had learned to see the world a little through my wife's eyes. What I did not know, in those early weeks of grief, was that Dorothy had spent the last 4 months of her life working quietly with our family attorney, Gerald Hoffman, on something she never told me about directly. She mentioned it once. Near the end, she was tired and drifting in and out, and she took my hand and said, "Walter, I fixed it. I want you to know I fixed it." I thought she was talking about the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom. I was wrong. About 6 weeks after the funeral, Gerald called me and asked if I could come to his office. He said Dorothy had left specific instructions about the timing of certain disclosures. I went on a Tuesday morning. Gerald is a careful man, not given to drama. But when I sat down across from him that day, I could see something in his face, a kind of quiet, settled satisfaction. The look of a man who had helped someone do something right. He told me that Dorothy, in her final months, had restructured everything. The company, the house, the investment accounts, all of it moved into a trust. The Crane Family Trust. Dorothy had funded it entirely. She was listed as grantor. Gerald was named independent trustee, and the terms of the trust were detailed, specific, and, as I would come to understand, brilliant. I was named primary beneficiary for the duration of my life. I would receive a monthly distribution sufficient to maintain my standard of living. I retained full use of the house on Maple Ridge Drive. I retained a consulting role at the company with no operational authority but full access to financial reporting. Ethan was named successor beneficiary, meaning he would inherit control of everything after I died, provided certain conditions were met. Those conditions were the part Dorothy had spent 4 months getting exactly right. Gerald read them to me slowly. If Ethan, or anyone acting on his behalf, attempted to remove me from the family home without my written consent, the successor beneficiary designation would be void. If Ethan failed to provide me with monthly financial reports as specified, void. If Ethan took on company debt exceeding 15% of assessed value without trustee approval, void. And the one Dorothy apparently insisted on most firmly, if I ever communicated to the trustee in writing that I had been mistreated, isolated, or made to feel unwelcome in my own family, the trustee had full discretionary authority to redirect the trust assets to a named charitable organization. That organization was the Akron Children's Education Foundation, a place Dorothy had volunteered at for 11 years, a place that helps kids who aged out of foster care get job training and community college tuition. I sat in Gerald's office for a long time after he finished reading. "She never told me," I said. Gerald nodded. "She said you would have argued with her about it." He was right. I would have. I would have said it was too complicated, too suspicious, that we should just trust our son. I would have been a fool. She also said, Gerald continued, folding his hands on the desk, that she hoped none of it would ever matter. That she hoped Ethan would simply be a good son. I drove home that day and I did not tell Ethan about any of it. Neither did Gerald. The trust was a matter of record, technically available if someone looked carefully, but Ethan had no reason to look. As far as he knew, Dorothy had left everything straightforwardly. A will, some assets, standard succession. He believed that for almost a year. In that year, things at the company changed more rapidly. Ethan brought in a new operations director, one of Renata's cousins as it turned out, and started restructuring the vendor contracts. He moved fast and he didn't consult me. I raised concerns. He told me, not unkindly at first, that I should let him run things. I tried to let him. Then Renata started coming to the office. She didn't have a title. She just started appearing in meetings. Ethan introduced her as a strategic advisor, which was not a real position, and everyone knew it. My remaining senior staff looked at me with careful, neutral expressions that said everything they couldn't say out loud. I pulled Ethan aside one afternoon in October. I told him I was worried. I told him some of the new vendor arrangements looked risky. He listened with his arms crossed and his jaw set, and when I finished, he said, "Dad, you've been out of a loop for 2 years. Let us handle it." Us. He said us. Not me. Us. I went home that evening and I sat on the back porch where Dorothy and I used to have coffee on summer mornings. And I thought about what she had seen coming that I hadn't. 3 months later, Ethan and Renata came to the house on a Sunday. They sat across from me at the kitchen table and Renata did most of the talking. She said they had been thinking about the future. She said the house was too large for one person and that the upkeep was considerable. She said they had found a very nice continuing care community in Hudson, about 30 minutes away, with excellent amenities and a strong social program. She slid a brochure across the table. I looked at the brochure. Then I looked at my son. "Are you asking me to leave my home?" I said. Ethan looked at the table. "We're suggesting it might be time for a transition." "This is the house your mother died in," I said. "This is the house we lived in for 26 years. Renata said that they understood this was emotional, but that practical considerations had to be weighed. She said the property taxes alone were significant. She mentioned, carefully, that if the house were sold, the proceeds could support my care for many years. She had clearly rehearsed this. I looked at my son for a long time. He did not look back. I told him I would think about it. They left. I sat at the kitchen table for 2 hours. Then I called Gerald. The following week, I wrote a letter. 3 paragraphs. Factual. not dramatic. I described the conversation at the kitchen table. I described the brochure. I described the fact that my son had not met my eyes once during the entire exchange. I sent it to Gerald by certified mail. I did not tell Ethan what I had done. What happened next unfolded over about 6 weeks, and I only understood the full sequence later, when Gerald walked me through it. Ethan, it turned out, had begun the process of taking on a significant line of credit against company assets, well above the 15% threshold in the trust. He needed trustee approval to do this. He did not know he needed trustee approval. He thought the company was simply his to leverage. The bank called Gerald as part of their standard due diligence. Gerald informed them politely that the transaction required trust authorization. The bank put the credit line on hold pending review. Ethan called the bank. The bank referred him to the trust documents. Ethan, for the first time, actually read the trust documents. He called me that evening. His voice was different, quieter. "Dad," he said, "what is this?" "It's your mother's trust," I said. "Why is Hoffman listed as trustee? Why do I need his approval to?" He stopped. "How long have you known about this?" "Since about 6 weeks after your mother's funeral," I said. Silence. "Dad, we need to talk." "Yes," I said. "I think we do." He came to the house 2 days later, without Renata. That was the first thing I noticed. He sat down at the same kitchen table, and this time he looked at me directly, and what I saw in his face was not anger. It was something more complicated than that. It was a man beginning to understand something he did not want to understand. I let him talk. He asked questions about the trust structure. I answered what I could and referred him to Gerald for the rest. At one point he asked, with genuine bewilderment in his voice, "Why would Mom do this?" I thought about that for a moment. "Because she loved you," I said. "And she loved you," I said. "And she loved me. And she was smarter than both of us put together." He didn't say anything for a while. Then I told him about the letter I had sent Gerald. I told him what it meant under the terms of the trust. I told him calmly, without anger, what the consequence of that letter could be if Gerald exercised his discretionary authority. Ethan's face went through several things in the span of about 10 seconds. "The whole company?" he said. "Everything Dorothy funded the trust with," I said, "which is everything." He put his hands flat on the table. "Dad, He stopped. Started again. "Renata thought." He stopped again. "I know what Renata thought," I said. We sat there in the kitchen for a long time. Outside, the neighbor's dog was barking at something in the yard. The refrigerator hummed. A house that had been mine for 26 years held its breath around us. I want to be honest with you about what I felt in that moment. I did not feel triumphant. I had watched my son sit across from me with a brochure for a retirement facility and suggest I leave the home where his mother spent her last weeks. There is no version of that which doesn't leave a mark on a father. There is no clever legal document that undoes the specific pain of looking at your child and not recognizing the person looking back. But I also felt, underneath all of that, something Dorothy had apparently counted on. I felt the particular stubbornness of a man who has built something with his hands and intends to protect it. And beyond that, deeper than that, I felt her. She had seen this. She had sat in a hospital bed in the last months of her life, and she had looked ahead down the road I couldn't see yet, and she had done something about it. She had protected me in the only language that would actually work. "I'm not trying to take anything from you," I told Ethan. "I never was. That was never the plan." "Then what do you want?" he said. His voice was raw. "I want my son back," I said. "That's all I've ever wanted." He looked at the table. Then he looked at me. And for the first time, and I don't know how long, longer than I wanted to count, he looked like the boy I remembered. Not entirely. People don't fully return from certain roads they've walked down. But enough. There was enough of him in there. He came back the following Sunday. still without Renata. He came back the Sunday after that, too. We didn't talk about the company much. We talked about his mother. He told me things I hadn't known, small memories he'd been carrying around, moments from his childhood that he'd never thought to mention before. I told him about Dorothy and me when we were young, before he was born, the apartment we had in Cleveland with the radiator that banged all winter. Gerald and I met the following month. I had a decision to make about the letter I had sent. Specifically, whether I wanted to formally invoke the discretionary clause or let it stand unused. I told Gerald I wanted to let it stand unused. He looked at me carefully. You understand that means Ethan retains his position as successor beneficiary? Yes, I said. And the company remains in the trust with standard succession? Yes. Gerald nodded slowly. Dorothy gave you full authority on this. It was always your call. I know, I said. She understood that too. What changed with Renata, I can't fully explain. I know that Ethan had several conversations with her that I was not present for. I know that the credit line he had been pursuing quietly collapsed when the lead investor pulled out after the trust situation became clear. I know that two of the clients Renata had brought in, ones that had always seemed slightly off to me, ended their contracts around the same time. What I know more concretely is that Renata stopped coming to the office. A month after that, Ethan told me she had taken a position with a firm in Charlotte. He told me this matter-of-factly at the kitchen table over coffee. He did not ask for my reaction. I did not offer one. He moved into a smaller place in Akron. He started calling me on Thursday evenings, not about the company. Just to talk. Last spring we drove up to the lake house Dorothy and I had kept in Sandusky for years, a place I hadn't been back to since she died. Ethan drove. We didn't talk much on the way up. When we got there, we sat on the dock for about an hour and watched the water. At some point, Ethan said quietly that he was sorry. He said it simply and completely, without qualification or explanation, the way you say something when you've thought about it for a long time and finally decided the thinking is done. I told him I knew. The dock needed some work. A few boards had softened over the winter. We spent the rest of that afternoon pulling bad planks and replacing them with lumber we bought at the hardware store in town. We didn't talk much while we worked. We didn't need to. I have thought many times since then about what Dorothy did, about the particular kind of love it takes to sit with a terminal diagnosis and spend your remaining energy not on bitterness, not on punishment, but on architecture. She built something that would hold after she was gone. She built it carefully and quietly, and she trusted me to use it with wisdom. And she trusted Ethan, even then, even knowing what she knew, to eventually find his way back. She was right. She was almost always right. I still have her coffee mug on the second shelf of the kitchen cabinet, the one with the chip on the handle that I offered to replace a dozen times. She always said the chip was what made it hers. I understand that now in a way I didn't when she was alive. The company is doing better. Ethan cut the arrangements that didn't make sense and rebuilt two of the vendor relationships I had flagged. He called me last fall to tell me we'd had our best quarter in 4 years. He sounded like himself on the phone, not the careful, managed version of himself I'd been talking to for 2 years, but actually himself. A little tired, a little proud, the way his mother used to sound when she finished a project she'd been working on for a long time. I am 67 years old. I live in the house on Maple Ridge Drive. I have coffee on the back porch on mornings when the weather permits. I keep Dorothy's mug on the second shelf. I do not know how much time I have. None of us do, but I know that whatever time is left, I will spend it in the house we built together, in the life we made, with a son who found his way back from a road I'm glad he didn't travel any further down. And somewhere, I am entirely certain Dorothy knows, and she is not surprised at all.